The night an 18-year-old girl knocked on a stranger's door in the middle of a violent storm, she wasn't just asking for shelter. She was running for her life. What the single dad inside didn't know was that opening that door would change everything. His past, his present, and a future he never thought he'd have again. The night the girl knocked on his door, the rain wasn't just falling, it was tearing the sky apart. Thunder rolled like a warning, and the wind clawed at the old wooden house as if trying to rip it open. Inside, Daniel sat alone at his small kitchen table, staring at a cold cup of tea he had forgotten to drink. He had grown used to silence, the kind that lingers long after loss. But that night, the silence shattered with a desperate, trembling knock that didn't just ask for shelter, it begged for survival. Before we go further, take a moment. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in humanity showing up when it matters most, like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us what it means to be human. Daniel hesitated. Life had taught him to be careful, to keep the world at a distance. Ever since his wife passed away 5 years ago, leaving him to raise his young son alone, he had built walls not just around his house, but around his heart. He wasn't a man who opened doors easily anymore, literally or emotionally, but something about that knock, weak yet urgent, stirred something deep within him. When he finally opened the door, the sight in front of him froze him in place. An 18-year-old girl stood there, soaked to the bone, her thin frame trembling under a worn-out jacket that did little to protect her from the cold. Her hair clung to her face, her eyes wide, not just with fear but exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from a long day, but from a long life. She didn't speak immediately. Her lips quivered as if forming words was too heavy a task. When she finally did, her voice was barely audible over the storm. She asked if she could stay just for the night, just until the rain stopped, just until she could breathe again. Daniel should have said no. Every instinct shaped by caution told him to. He had a child inside, responsibilities, a fragile routine he had fought hard to maintain. Letting a stranger in, especially one with a story written all over her face, meant inviting complications he wasn't ready for. But then he noticed something. It wasn't just fear in her eyes, it was the absence of anywhere else to go. And so, without fully understanding why, Daniel stepped aside and let her in. The warmth of the house wrapped around her like something unfamiliar. She stood awkwardly near the entrance, unsure whether to move further, as if she didn't quite believe she had been allowed inside. Daniel handed her a towel, avoiding too many questions at first. He wasn't ready for answers, and she didn't seem ready to give them. His son, Noah, peeked from the hallway, curious. At just 8 years old, Noah had a way of seeing the world without suspicion. He didn't see a stranger, he saw someone who needed help. He gave her a small, shy smile, the kind that carried more comfort than words ever could. Daniel set up a small space for her in the living room. It wasn't much, a couch, a blanket, a pillow, but to her, it felt like a sanctuary. That night the storm continued to rage outside, but inside something quieter began to unfold. The next morning brought an uneasy calm. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried the heaviness of what had passed. The girl woke up early, as if she didn't trust herself to stay too long. She moved quietly, trying not to disturb anything, not to take up space she felt she didn't deserve. Daniel found her standing near the window, staring outside as if calculating her next move. That's when he finally asked her name. She said it softly, like it might break if spoken too loudly. Her name was Aisha. Over the next few days, fragments of her story emerged, not all at once, not easily, but in pieces that felt heavy even in silence. She had run away from a home that was never truly a home, a place where safety was an illusion and fear was routine. She had been on the streets for days, moving from one uncertain place to another, until the storm forced her to stop. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He recognized something in her, the same quiet pain he had carried after losing his wife. Different stories, different wounds, but the same hollow space where stability should have been. Letting her stay for one night turned into 2, then 3. Each day Daniel wrestled with himself. He knew this wasn't a permanent solution. He wasn't equipped to fix her life. but sending her away felt like abandoning her to the very darkness she had escaped. Noah, meanwhile, had already accepted her presence as something natural. He would sit near her talking about school, about small things that didn't matter, but somehow mattered deeply. Aisha, who had learned to guard herself, found it impossible to stay distant around him. His innocence chipped away at her walls bit by bit. Days turned into weeks and something began to shift. The house, once filled with silence, now carried quiet signs of life again. Aisha started helping with small chores, cooking occasionally, even laughing. Softly at first, then more freely. It was as if she was rediscovering parts of herself she had buried. Daniel noticed it too, not just in her, but in himself. The loneliness that had settled into his bones for years began to loosen its grip. Caring for someone again, even in small ways, reminded him of who he used to be before grief hardened him. But life doesn't allow peace without testing it. One afternoon, there was another knock at the door. This one wasn't desperate, it was firm, deliberate. When Daniel opened it, the air shifted instantly. Two men stood outside, their presence heavy with authority and something darker beneath it. Aisha froze when she saw them. The color drained from her face, her body tensing as if preparing for something inevitable. They claimed to be looking for her, their words polite but their eyes anything but. Daniel didn't need the full story to understand. He stepped forward, positioning himself between them and the girl behind him. For the first time in years, he felt something stronger than caution. He felt protective. The confrontation was brief but intense. Daniel refused to let them in, refused to hand her over without understanding the situation. His calm but firm stance unsettled them enough to leave, but not without a warning that lingered long after they were gone. That night, Aisha broke down. Not quietly, not in fragments, but completely. The fear she had been holding back poured out, along with the truth she had tried to keep hidden. She wasn't just running from a bad home, she was running from people who saw her as something to control, something to use. Daniel listened, not as a savior, but as someone who understood what it meant to feel powerless. And in that moment, a decision was made. Not out of impulse, but out of conviction. He wasn't going to send her away. The days that followed were different. More cautious, more aware of the risks, but also more determined. Daniel reached out for help, not trying to handle everything alone. It wasn't easy, but slowly, steps were taken toward giving Aisha a real chance at safety and a future. Months passed. The house changed again, but this time it wasn't just about survival, it was about rebuilding. Aisha enrolled in school. She found small moments of joy in ordinary things. Studying, cooking, even arguing playfully with Noah. The fear that once defined her began to fade, replaced by something fragile but powerful. Hope. Daniel watched it all unfold with a quiet sense of fulfillment. He hadn't planned for any of this. He hadn't expected that opening his door one stormy night would change not just her life, but his own. Because in saving her, he had unknowingly saved himself too. Before we reach the end, here's something special. If you're still watching, comment "Kindness still exists" to show you believe in the power of humanity. Your words might inspire someone else more than you realize. Years later, the memory of that night remained vivid, not because of the storm, but because of what followed. A single decision to open a door had created a ripple effect that transformed lives. Aisha stood taller now, stronger, no longer defined by her past. Noah grew up with a deeper understanding of compassion. And Daniel, he finally found peace not in forgetting his loss, but in choosing to live again. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can change everything, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment. Your support helps keep stories like this alive, because sometimes all it takes